Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask a Pianist. My name is Andrew Ahrens, and today we're going to look at what drives music. Specifically, how we as pianists tell the story that the composer is asking us to. What do we do as pianists? Well, we take printed music, or in some cases handwritten facsimile scores, and convert this static language into dynamic sound. The musical score tells us the notes to play, when to play them, and in most cases, how to play them. And by following this instruction manual, we can come up with an approximate version of what the composer wanted us to produce. But there's far more to it than just following instructions. Pieces of music are written with a narrative in mind, whether or not this narrative is explicit or extra musical. What I mean by this is that sometimes a piece of music will be telling a literal story, like Debussy's Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun, or sometimes a piece has no literal meaning, but there is still a defined development of musical material, which gives the impression to the listener that a story is unfolding. Most abstract music is composed with this in mind, and Western art music is dominated numerically by abstract music. So where does that leave us as pianists? Let's have a look at a specific common storytelling technique used in music. Much of the piano repertoire includes sections where a melody is played in the right hand or upper register with an accompaniment in the left hand or bass register. One will find in classical and romantic sonatas that a theme will be stated rather early on in the piece and will probably come back at another point, perhaps in a different key or register. This serves two purposes: to remind the listener of what they've heard before, and to present a different viewpoint on the musical material that makes up the theme. The composer is telling us something, and we see it again later on through a different set of eyeglasses, so to speak. As an example, we can consider Mozart's Sonata in C major. Now, let's have a listen to when this theme comes back. What is the difference between these two? Aside from the key, we have a different register, and arguably a different character for the melody. Instead of this, we have this. Now let's consider the same problem, but given to us by a different composer. This is from Medtner's F minor Sonata. This is the same technique, but it comes to us from radically different composers. There are many different ways composers can present this kind of dichotomy, but it serves a dramatic purpose, which we as pianists must communicate through our use of rubato or tone production, or even something as simple as pedaling or changing the dynamic to be softer or louder. A story requires the audience to be able to look back on an event, to see how far we've come. The real trick here is figuring out what story the composer is trying to tell, and this is one of our main responsibilities as pianists when we interpret a score. In the Mozart example, the music is nearly identical, with the main difference being the register and the key. On the one hand, this makes it rather easy to deal with as a pianist. Even if we try to play the theme exactly the same, the difference in register and key will make the recurrence of the theme appear slightly different to the listener. Indeed, even the structural context can make the theme sound different. If we want to make a conscious effort to play the theme differently, then we have to decide what kind of atmosphere or emotional content we want to create. The main theme is more central on the instrument, possibly more solid, if we want to use that word. The repetition of the theme appears in a higher register, so naturally it may sound a little more transparent, or if we want to use a metaphor, we could say it sounds more bird-like. Now, we can accentuate this difference by perhaps playing this a little softer or a little more tender. Alternately, we could try to mimic a music box effect by playing this theme a little more staccato while using copious amounts of pedal. There are many options available, and it's all dependent upon what kind of musical intention you are trying to communicate. With the Medtner example, we have an interesting case where the composer specifically indicates what he wants in terms of change. The first theme starts out in mezzo piano, eventually growing to forte for the second statement. This theme is stated in C minor in the middle register of the piano. When the theme comes back later in the piece, it's in F minor, in a higher register. This mimics what happens in the Mozart example before. However, the most interesting issue I find is that Medtner not only has this statement marked pianissimo, but he asks for the una corda to be used, as well as marking sempre piano e dolce. He's essentially giving us a character or atmosphere to aim for, and this can give us freedom and license, within the compositional boundaries, to experiment with rubato, sound control, and of course articulation. I can play it a little slower. I can play it with more rubato. And of course, I could play it a little more legato than the first time I played it. Now, with all these possibilities, there are also the possibilities of combinations. And I personally choose to play it with a more balanced combination of these forces. Not too much rubato, not too much of a legato change in the articulation, and maybe a little bit of a change in the tempo. So that's it for this episode. As always, thanks for watching, and keep on making music. Bye for now.